Welcome to the Fierce Kind Mama of Multiples podcast. This podcast is for anyone raising multiples, twins, triplets, or more. I speak to inspiring parents of multiples who have healed from unexpected pregnancies and birthing experiences and who candidly share the highs and lows of raising multiples. I also speak to the professionals that work with multiple birth families. Together, we cover the practicalities of raising more than one baby at a time, as well as enhancing the emotional well-being of caregivers and children alike. Come join us as we laugh, cry, and share our personal and professional wisdom on all things multiples. I'm your host, Dr. Christina Kvetsa, and I am a fierce, kind mama of multiples. Today, I'm joined by Michelle Cruz. Michelle is a dynamic force in the reproductive space, serving as a passionate birth doula and the president of the Central Texas Doula Association in the United States. Her work focuses on supporting families through pregnancy and birth, with a particular advocacy for individuals identifying as Fat, Black, Indigenous, and people of color. She's a mother of 3, including twins. Michelle, who is neurodivergent herself, is an advocate for education and is dedicated to adult learners. She's making a significant impact in reproductive advocacy, especially for Black mamas, in her vibrant Austin community. You're going to hear Michelle talk about her own personal experiences, as well as those mothers she supports who experience discrimination and inequity in the healthcare system and beyond. I really hope you'll be able to hear her vibrant personality and commitment and dedication to her family and work throughout this interview. I hope you enjoy the conversation, and if you have any feedback or follow-up questions, feel free to reach out to me or to connect with Michelle. I'll pop her contact details in the show notes. So wonderful to have you here, Michelle.
Thank you. I'm excited to be a part of your podcast today.
Thank you so much. Why don't we just dive in and start by you telling us a bit about yourself and the work that you do?
Yeah, so I am a birth doula primarily, and I've spent the last 5 years in the reproductive space, either in educating people to become doulas, educating mothers and fathers and parents to be, and also helping folks that have reproductive struggles like endometriosis, PCOS, and who are Fat and Black and exist in a space that otherwise wouldn't be supported. So that's where I exist, and I am the Galactic Doula as my business name, and I'm proud to be neurodivergent and helping folks with anxiety as well, and those whose brains may work differently. That's me.
Wow. Yeah, I love that. Can you tell us a little bit about the name, Galactic Doula? How did that come about?
So I love the name. I'm very nerdy and space oriented. And so my husband's actually an aerospace engineer. I've always been one to be on the looking into research for space and science and technology and Star Trek and all the nerdy things. And I really wanted to have something that held space. And so I think of when I come into a birth environment at a home or a hospital or even an educational space, we're literally coming together, and the galaxy as a whole is the space we all already inhabit. And so I bring space to people where they otherwise may not have someone to hold it for them or support them either emotionally or physically. And I wanted to rebrand. And so I used to be Doula 360 with my sister. She did postpartum support. I did birth support. But now I am the one doing this business, and she's off doing amazing things, doing nonprofit work. And so I figured I wanted to be something that was just for me. And I am the Galactic Doula. And that's how it came about. And I love it. So it makes more sense for me in the sense that I can be unique and be different and encompass more supportive work and be more niched work for those who are neurodivergent.
Wow, that's amazing. I really love that. I love that you, how you described holding space for families. I think that's such an important aspect that often is not, it's kind of brushed aside a little bit. It's kind of like we just got to go through the checks and monitor you in the pregnancy and do all the things that we need to kind of just get done. And there's not a lot of slowing down and holding space, which can be so important.
And that's also a big struggle for folks that are already entering, like, for instance, the hospital system, where they could be othered. Maybe they don't fit the cookie cutter world of the expectant mother, and they need extra supports. And so someone that coming in that's maybe, fat, or they are Black, or they have autism, or they have severe anxiety, they already feel like they don't belong in that space. And so I come in to support them and fill the gaps, and even sometimes be like a translator, like an international medical translator, taking information from what the doctors and nurses are saying, or the providers, and making it palatable and understanding, adding some love and emotion to it, so my clients can better support and make better choices for their birth and their parenting choices.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And when you were speaking, I was thinking actually that there might be some listeners that are listening thinking, okay, she said she was a doula, and I don't quite understand. I don't quite understand what that is or what a doula
Yeah.
does. And I think you've started to highlight some of the things that you do and how you support families. But I wonder if you could tell us how what does being a doula entail?
So a doula is a non-medical provider who provides support to people in all aspects of the reproductive journey. So everything from fertility support, birth and labor, and as well as postpartum. But we're providing informational education, evidence-based information. We're providing information about what the hospital system is going to be like, what it's like working with different kinds of providers. We will also provide non-medical comfort techniques. So I may come in and help folks do different position movements to help them be more comfortable in their pregnancy, or help them understand what's going to be happening in the steps that take place, and different information, like, for instance, if they're having an induction or a cesarean, kind of that bridging the gap between what just the provider is going to offer versus what the information that they may have to go look for. And so I bring that research with me and give it. It's never offering my opinion. I do not offer my opinion. I continue to give information so my clients can make those choices. So it's those three pillars: emotional, informational, and then also offering physical support, but all from a non-medical point of view. So I'm not taking, blood pressures or diagnosing anyone. I will refer all of that to their correct provider, no matter who it's for, but I will be that supportive person that they may call and say, hey, I have a question about this. Or, I want to tell you about my experience today, being non-judgmental and supportive and offering that space. Especially where I'm at here in Austin, Texas, it's a college town. There are a lot of folks that have moved here from all around the world, left families behind. They don't have that person to call anymore, or they lost family during the pandemic and they no longer have that sister or mother to call. And so they call me or WhatsApp me or whatever, however we're communicating, and let me know what's going on. And then I can support them or say, you're right, maybe you should call your provider. Or, maybe it is time to find a different provider. So offering them that option to have that conversation, also being there when they need it. Sometimes you just need a hand to hold in their laboring process. And I usually join families at active labor and all the way through until they have baby. And then I'm there for their first latch for the first 90 minutes to 2 hours, and then a follow-up visit within 24 hours or 48 hours after baby has been born, and reconnecting them with support. If they need more support, I thankfully in a network of amazing other postpartum doulas, so I'm able to refer them for that, just because my focus is on such high needs clients that I'm able to give them that, and then I refer them to folks that can give them more support postpartum. But it is truly, and more than anything, connecting with someone and making sure that their needs are met. And a big thing too about being a doula is continuity of care. We're with them before baby is born. We're providing education with them, about the birth process, about what happens. There's lots of things that happen in birth that no one tells you about. Like, for instance, like APGAR scores, the appearance, grimace, pulse, and respiration. No one's telling you what are these numbers they're calling out. We're letting them know in advance of things that may happen, so they're not caught off guard. So it's reducing a lot of stress, reducing a lot of fear in birth, because we discuss things prenatally or with them during the birth process and postpartum. I love it. It's literally my dream job. I eat, breathe, and sleep birth all day.
And I can see your excitement with it. How did you get into this type of work? What fascinated you about it or interested you?
So I have always had endometriosis, and so I've always been interested in the reproductive workings of internal reproductive organs and things. And I knew that I wanted to do something, but I wanted to do non-medical. So I had my oldest in 2013, whew, so long ago. And it was a traumatic birth, unfortunately. I had a coerced cesarean. And then when I got pregnant with my twins, I had someone donate postpartum care to me, overnight postpartum care. And I remember sitting with her in the middle of the night, 2 a.m, being like, how did you get here? And hearing her tell me her story of being a nanny, and she wanted to do more work for families who were having, fresh babies. And she had worked with twins herself, which helped me with my twins. And then I left that conversation and asked my sister, she had the same thought of wanting to do something different, a career change. And we were like, well, what do we like? So we just wrote down, okay, we like babies, we like moms, we like working with families, we like education, we like helping people, to meet their needs. And we're like, okay, what is this? And we're like, and I told her about my conversation with my postpartum doula. She goes, why aren't we doulas? Let's just do that. Let's try it out. And I was like, oh, I don't know. And then she's like, just trust me. Let's do some research. Let's see if we can do this, if it makes sense. And so we ended up finding a training out of Canada that we loved, called Bibomia. And it was a wonderful training. It was very in-depth, lots of information. It was so much more than just like a 4-hour class. It was very in-depth and concise, but also the point where we knew we were going to make change. And so I took that class and I was like, this is my life. This is what I want to do. I want to be there to help change a whole family, because in my mind, if I help one family, I'm helping a whole community, because then they're going to go tell their friends and their family, oh, you know what? My doula taught me the information here, or here's this link my doula sent me, or this book I read, and it helped me to, survive the first 2 years, or help me to maintain whatever goal it is. And I've seen that happen with the families I've worked with, is little changes, little things like saying, hey, you know what? I think we do want an hour alone. And then the mom been like, oh, I can actually tell someone to leave me alone. I'm like, yes, you can. You just had your babies. Like, you don't have to entertain people. You're newly postpartum. So giving people their power back, I think, is one of the best parts of being a doula. And I'm so thankful that I had this opportunity, and I've been able to help so many families in the Austin area to have support. And then being able to also teach doulas as well has been great, to have them go on internationally and help new families all around the world be able to connect and find some support. And so that's been a beautiful blessing of being a part of this, is being a doula trainer and helping new baby doulas be able to support families. So it's been a whirlwind the last 5 years, and it's been the best thing I possibly could have asked for, because I get to teach, I get to talk, and I get to help people, and they get to, actually see change with just little things like taking a moment and saying, okay, is this a choice for me, or is this a choice for everybody? Oh, it's a choice for everybody. Maybe I won't do it. Maybe I will do it. So little things like that, giving them their ability to look inside and hear their intuition, is a lot of what doula work is giving people the tools so they can discern if they want to do that choice, or they can just do whatever they want and tell everyone, like, you know what? No, thank you. That no thank you power, no is a complete sentence, is so
Yes.
powerful in birth.
Yes. And everything you said there was amazing. It does sound really powerful. And, as you were speaking, I was thinking, because I know you're based in the States, you said it, that
Yes.
you're based in Texas. And where I'm positioned here currently in Australia, I know when it comes to multiple birth pregnancies, they're typically heavily monitored. And I don't know of many multiple birth families that utilize doula services. And I'm wondering what it's like in your part of the world. Like, do you provide services for many multiple birth families? And if you do those services look different than the services that you might provide if the family is expecting one baby?
So I do provide services for multiple parents here, and there are many parents reaching out for doula support here. There's been a big step back from the medicalization of a multiple birth. There are still families that are still following, getting many scans and getting, with a maternal fetal medicine doctor and different things. And that's fine. We always want folks to have the ability to reach out for care. But there is a little bit of difference between servicing a singleton family versus multiples. I do add 2 more actual conversations where we discuss like the what ifs of multiple births, because it can be different. There's more education and supportive. And I also want multiple parents to have the skills to know that they can ask for help of the community and of myself. And I think that alone is hard for folks to say, I need help. And I think that's challenging. So I do see there are folks coming in and wanting all the bells and whistles. They want the doula, they want the midwife, they want the OB, they want the MFM, they want all of it. And that's totally fine. And then there are folks who are like, I'm birthing at home. I'm birthing at home. I want a midwife. I'm having twins. And there's been a resurgence and more and more twin families birthing at home with midwives, which I think is a wonderful thing. And that's, of course, to say like these are midwives or births that are, non-complicated. They've been scanned, they've been vetted, that there's verification that nothing awry. And so there's that piece of it, where folks can get nervous and go like, what do you mean birthing at home? They're not having a hospital birth. They're not giving birth in an OR. But that's their choice. And so we let them have the choice. I am not going to dictate someone's birth choices. I will inform them of their options, 100% of what their options could be, and that the fact that each option has its own variable for what could happen. And so with folks that want to birth at home, I said, that's very well, you want to birth at home, but keep in mind, here are the risks of doing that. Here are the risks of not doing that. And I think that's empowering for parents, because then they can make those choices and know, hey, I do have a choice. I can make a decision about what I want to do. It was funny last winter. I was actually talking to a client today. Last winter, we had so many babies born last winter. It was a backup at the hospitals. It was this insane boom. And there was at least one twin mom I heard of, another one of my doula friends, who was like, I'm scheduled for a cesarean. It was her first babies, scheduled for a cesarean. And they were backed up. There were so many babies giving birth. They were pushing cesareans back 2 or 3 days. She ended up giving birth at home with the EMS team. She went into spontaneous labor waiting for her cesarean and had both babies at home with the emergency services team. And everyone was like baffled by it, because they're like, you have to have a cesarean. But things like that happen, like she was 40 weeks. Babies are great. She's doing wonderful. I actually just saw her a couple of months ago at a, mom's meetup we have here in town. But it's just crazy how these things are happening, where this dismissal of you have to have babies in the OR. And that's very strict. I don't know if it's necessarily the westernization of birth, but this, you have twins, you're going to have a vaginal delivery, it's going to be in the OR, or it's going to be in the room adjacent to it. It's going to be in, a certain theater. And I've seen some folks of this fear of what could happen. But I like to give parents their power back when I work with them. They'll know you have choices you can make. You can make requests of them. You can make requests for the midwife to round on you while you're in labor, to have them come and check in on you. So giving them their power, giving them their options is important, more so than singletons, because a lot of times it's like, oh, you have twins. Sorry, bye. Doctors and providers can just say, I'm not working with you. And that's just devastating to a birther, to be like, what do you mean you're not working with me? Like I waited 2 weeks for this appointment, and now you're saying, as I have twins, you won't help me. So giving them the options is key. I know that the medical system being very different here versus in Australia, but there's still this fear of twins. And like, it's 2013, 2014, 2000, this time has flown. We're not where we were 15, 20 years ago. There's much more higher imaging. There's much better testings for blood exams. And there's lots of things that can be determined way before we get to labor, to see what's going on and how we can support babies when they do arrive. So I like to make sure all the parents have information.
Yeah, I think that what's so important, what I've taken from that, is that choice, and not just the perception of like perceiving that you have choice, but actually feeling like you really do have choices. I've spoken with a lot of multiple birth parents here in Australia, and one of the themes that I often hear is, as soon as they found out they were having twins or triplets, it was like the choices became much narrower in terms of what they could expect for the birth and post-birth. Like the idea of a home birth for twins and triplets here in Australia, anyway, in my experience, like may be people that have home births, but I rarely hear that. And I think that there are some people that have that in their mind. That's what they would have liked. That's what they were aiming for. And then they find out they're having multiples, and they get told by the professionals that, oh, well, that it's just too risky now.
Yeah. That happens, unfortunately. I think it depends, at least here in the States and even in Texas, what kind of midwife you have. And if you're seeing also OB care as well. So I know there's a couple midwives in Texas that will do twin deliveries at home if the person also is getting regular visits from an OB's office, just to verify things and to have that extra care team in case there is a transfer. Because even in a singleton home birth, there's always a risk of a transfer to a hospital. And that's just the reality of birth. It's we can't always guarantee what's going to happen. So having that knowledge and those relationships already built, I think adds a protective layer to parents. But yeah, giving them the choices, even if they do have to have an in-hospital birth, letting them know what that birth could look like, giving them their power to say, you know what, I want everybody that comes in the room to introduce themselves to me and to keep the conversation about me and about my babies and not about, their golf practice they went to or what their appointment is going to be or the client in the next room over. So giving parents that ability to make choices, even if it doesn't mean they can have this fairy tale delivery, is so important. I think that's why parents are reaching out for doula support, is because they are hearing that there's this extra person in the room that's watching what's going on and protecting over them and letting them know, like, hey, I can see what's happening to you. You look upset. What's wrong? Whereas their partner or husband or wife may not see that information, but we as birth keepers, some of us say, can see that change in their face or that emotional shift where they can say something's different. And we can come into them and say, do you need a minute to cry? Like, do you want me to hold your hand? Are you excited about something or whatever it could possibly be? Bringing them into the space. Because birth, as hard as it is, and then adding that it's multiples. And if there's anything else going on with babies or with pregnancy, we want to have that extra person there to kind of keep you grounded in that space, keep you connected. And that's the beauty of birth work, is that extra person there to bring you into the space so you can remember those precious moments.
Yeah. And I see it as also being that independent person that can hold that perspective and can hold the space. Because when it's your partner or another loved one, they're going through their own emotion and experience. They might not be able to see clearly kind of what's happening. And I've often heard from partners where they say, I really wanted to say something, but I didn't know how. I didn't know how to speak up to the doctors, or I didn't know I had the right to do so. Whereas I see your role, and I could be wrong, but I almost see your role as that bridge between the medical professionals, if you like, or some of the other professionals, and the mother or the expectant parents.
Yeah, I often use this phrase when I'm speaking in a room with the doctors and nurses and the parents. I'll look at the parent and say, didn't you say insert here? And they'll say, oh, we did say whatever it was. So like, for instance, I had a birth a couple of weeks ago and there was the concern of infection because the waters had been ruptured. So I say, weren't you concerned about her temperature a few minutes ago? That's not me saying, hey, doc, you need to check the temperature. That's me referring back to dad. And dad's like, you were right. 20 minutes ago, we did feel there was a risk, because they need that power. Even my clients who of themselves are educated and supported and, may have affluent status, they still sometimes get fearful of doctors and don't know what to say. And so I'll bridge that gap and help them find the words or know when the right time is to speak up and say, hey, you know what? You can always pull the doctor into the hallway and ask some questions. You have that right to ask questions and say, can you just clarify for me again? Or could you explain it again? Or do you have a link about that research? Giving them the chance to connect. And then I will put myself out of the equation and make sure that the partners are connecting, make sure that the parents are coming to get together, because sometimes they don't know what to say to each other. They don't know when the moments are. So I have a habit of grabbing a dad and saying, okay, now is the time. I want you to go give her a kiss in the cheek, on the forehead, and give her a hug. Tell her why you love her. I'm going to step out for a few minutes so you have some privacy, because I want their faces to remember each other. I don't want them to remember my face. Like, I want to be like, the chair in the room that was just there. I want them to remember each other's power and each other's love for each other, no matter who it is, so they can have that connection. And they have more courage to speak up when something happens. And even just to speak up in general, to tell the doctor, I thank you for being a part of our birth. Even that sometimes feels like a large task because they don't know how to approach them.
Hi there, Fierce Kind Mama. Sorry to interrupt the discussion, but I have something to share with you that I know you're going to love. We're often told that parenting can be hard And whether you're a soon-to-be or current parent of multiples, there is going to come a time when you will probably feel stressed, overwhelmed, or even worried about the future. That's why I've developed a free guide for parents just like you with my 5 top tips for handling stress and overwhelm. You can download it now from my website, fiercekindmama.com. Yeah, and in your experience, do you think that multiple birth parents in particular need more support?
I feel like there's 2 groups. There's the group that is, I don't know if you hear this, the type A parent that becomes multiples. They're like, they've got the world on their shoulders. They can do all kinds of things. And there's this other group that's like, I've got twins. I'm so overwhelmed. I don't know what to say. And I will sometimes give them like the words and say, here's what you could say. Here are the questions. So one of the things I provide is a very in-depth prenatal education. And so on one of the pages, it has a list of questions. So I'll say, hey, remember that list? You can ask these questions of doctor whenever a medical choice comes up. And oh yeah, that list. And they'll start asking the questions. And then they go, oh yeah, thank you. And I always say too, take the list wherever you like. You can ask these questions of anybody. Say, is this relevant? Is this important? Are you telling me this information for me, or are you telling it for everybody? Or can I have 5 more minutes to think about it? In those few questions, you can get a lot of information from doctor. They could say, oh, actually, this is specialized information just for you because of the kind of twins you're having, or because this prior health issue you've experienced, or no, I offer this to everybody. It's everyone gets this. And then they can decide, okay, am I going to follow with that choice? Or am I going to do something else? But the parents that know what they want to do and they have that type A, like, yes, I have to sometimes tell them, you don't have to tell doctor everything. You can take it back. You don't have to give them all of your power because you're going to need it when the babies come. So kind of help them to soften their parenthood and soften their pregnancy, not to the point where they are, walked over, but the point where they can feel more of that nurture. And sometimes they haven't been nurtured. And so they need that care and support. And so I come in almost as like that big sister role and be like, hey, let me take care of you. This is the time for you to rest. This is the time for you to be heard. And you're not having to take care of anybody else but yourself. And we're going to care for you. And so I find that those 2 groups are who I usually end up working with, is the folks that have a lot going on and folks are like, I don't know what to do. I'm confused.
Yeah, right. And when you were speaking, I was thinking, how do the families actually find you? Like, is this, I'm assuming that this is a private service, that you're not attached necessarily to a hospital and you're not
No.
part of like the public system. So how do families go, yeah, I want a doula and I want to find someone. How do they find
Yeah.
you?
So a lot of people find me from social media. I'm on TikTok and Instagram and all those places. And then there's a lot of folks that have found me from parent groups. In my early days of doing doula work, I did gift out services to parents that maybe had lost income, or they had lost housing, and or they just needed extra pair of hands during their labor because of different things. And so those mothers and parents actually wrote about their experiences in local mom groups and parenting groups. So I do get some referrals from there. But lately, I right now am the president of the Central Texas Doula Association. And so I do get folks that come and get referrals from there. It's a professional organization of other doulas that do birth and postpartum work here in town. Kind of encompasses like the entire area. So not just Austin, but the smaller towns surrounding. And they will see me on the resource and say that I do multiple support and call me from there. And I do love when I find someone that just like, oh, I just happened to find you on Instagram. I was just scrolling and saw your face and thought you were cool. And I was like, oh, nice. So there is that. So there is some of that. But a lot of it's from social media, people just looking for doula support and reading other mothers and parents' experiences and then reaching out. And that's how the majority of my clients have found me. A few have been, word of mouth, direct friend to friend, but most from social media.
Yeah, but it sounds like it's the work that you do and the advocacy as well, the
Yes.
social justice work that it sounds like you're doing too, that is a real appeal. And I'd love to touch on that. But before we go there, I was wondering, I know you've mentioned that you're a mother, you've mentioned that you have twins. I know you're a mother of actually 3 children. Would you be willing to share with us a bit about your own multiple birth journey, what that looked like, whether you had plans in place for the pregnancy and post-birth and how those panned out? I wonder if you could just walk us through how you managed in those early days and throughout the pregnancy and birthing experience.
Sure. I always wanted twins, like always. And I've always been someone that like fairly in tune with my body. Maybe it's my autism, maybe it's not. To just know what's going on in my body. But I had my oldest, and I breastfed him for almost 3 years. And then we're like, okay, I'm gonna wean. So we did a long process of weaning, and I said, we're gonna wean. He's 3. This is the perfect time to just take a break. I'll have my body back. And then about 6 weeks in, my husband's like, well, let's just try for another baby, like for 1 month, what's the hurt? The hurt is I got pregnant with twins in that 1 month. So I went from breastfeeding my oldest to like 6 weeks a month of nothing, and then getting pregnant with twins. And I had this very vivid dream that I was coming home carrying 2 car seats. And I woke up and I was like, I'm pregnant. I know I'm pregnant, and I know it's twins. And so I took a test. I hadn't even missed my period yet. And it was so dark. It was so dark. And so I remember going and telling my husband, I was like, I think it's twins. And he was like, no way. I'm like, I guarantee you it's twins. I was like, this pregnancy test is so dark. The color changed so fast. It's twins. And so we go to the 6-week checkup because I like advocated, please, I would like to have it. And they're like, no, just wait. I was like, no, it's very common in the United States for folks to wait to 8-9 weeks, almost 10 weeks for a scan, if they even can get a scan. Most folks don't even have a scan until 20 weeks. They just do a heartbeat check with a Doppler and like some blood to check HCG. But I was like, no, I need a scan, please, because I know that there's a difference in care, depending on what kind of twins you have. And so I was like, please, please, please. And the tech's like, okay, fine, sure, whatever, lady. And so she checks, she's like, okay. And she goes, oh, okay. I'm like, what do you mean? She goes, there's a second baby here. And I was like, mm-hmm. She was expecting us to be like shocked and surprised, where my husband goes, nah, we already knew. We already knew. And she's like, you already knew. It's your first scan. I was like, I had a really strong intuition feeling, that I had twins, and I was twins. So I had the same doctor delivered my oldest, even though she was not the kindest doctor. And then at like my 16-week appointment, she comes into the room and she goes, well, let's see who's alive today. And I said,
Gosh.
excuse me? And I said, what do you mean? She goes, well, it's just that you haven't reached viability yet, so we don't know. And I looked at her dead in the face. I said, how dare you tell that to me? Because if she said it to me, she said it to other people. She said it to other mothers. And so, of course, everybody, they were fine. Both twins were there, A and B. No big deal. Nothing had changed. They were looking great. And we left the room, and of course I'm in tears. And my husband's like, we'll never see her again. He was like, we'll never step foot in this office again. And I called around and I found a different doctor. I went to her and she's like, maybe she's having an off day. And then I repeated what she said. She goes, that is not an off day. She's like, there is no excuse for that kind of behavior. She's like, absolutely not. And I had a pretty uneventful pregnancy. Of course, I had a 3-year-old running around who had autism, and we were struggling with different things with him. And because of his birth and the way I had a second incision on my uterus, I had to have a scheduled C-section. Had a couple false labors here and there at 30 weeks. But thankfully, because I'm really close to a well-established hospital, I was able to get medication to stop my labor. So I was able to deliver all the way until 38 and 7, almost 39, 40 weeks, almost. And I had a cesarean, and that went well. The only thing that happened, well, the babies were fine. Is because of my endometriosis and the previous delivery, I had scar tissue that formed that my uterus had attached to my abdominal wall. So it actually ended up being a 2-hour cesarean because the doctor had to stop everything she was doing when she got past the fascia to separate my uterus from my abdominal wall because of the scar tissue. So there was that. And that's also why I'm having a hysterectomy in a couple of weeks, because my endometriosis has ravaged my body. But the best part about all of this postpartum is that doula. That postpartum doula I had came to the hospital with me because unfortunately my husband got food poisoning like the day before I had the twins. So he was so sick. But she came to the hospital with me. She helped me shower. She helped me get out of bed. She brought babies to me to feed. She stayed up with me for hours, and her being there, I say, was the best choice I ever made, because she came to my house 3 days a week for the first like 16 weeks of life. And it was the best thing I've ever did. She came a couple times after that, but mostly those first 16 weeks. And she came probably like 8 p.m. to like 4 or 5 in the morning, then she'd go. But it was great because we could put our oldest to bed. She'd help if I needed to eat or shower, help get the babies ready for their bedtime feed them. And she was also on board with our nurture plan, with responding to babies' cues, being there for them and not letting them cry it out or anything like that. We were doing lots of nurture care where we were neurological, biological infant sleep, where we're responding to infants' brains as they grow. Well, lots of science in this house. And so it was wonderful because, other folks were like, oh, they're fine. I'm like, no, please respond. And so she did not fight us on that, which was so helpful. But so many hours of her coming and watching over them, I think helped with my postpartum anxiety, to know that there was someone who was on my side, like on my team, to be there. And then from then on, it was like, once she left, I was like, okay, I guess we've just aged out of the doula system. Because postpartum doulas, their goal is to work themselves out of a job where the parents feel strong enough and supportive, but they don't need someone to come and help them. And I tell all my postpartum clients, singleton and especially multiples, to have that doula list, and have that person that can come and help them. It doesn't have to be overnight, but her overnight care, I think, was helpful to my mental health, to my physical healing from the cesarean, helping with my oldest who had autism, and just knowing that her care was there, and that if I woke up crying in the middle of the night, I could go talk to her and not feel alone. It was the best thing. So our journey was exciting and fun. We love having the twins. They're truly amazing. Our oldest is Eli. The twins are Estelle and Ender, and they are all such unique individual people. Now, the one thing that does come in with my birth that is different is because I am biracial, I'm Black and white, my husband's white and Hispanic. In the early days of the twins, my oldest is very dark skinned. He looks like he is fully Black, but my twins are very fair. They have blonde hair, they have blue eyes, and many times I was called the nanny, pushing the stroller in the store. Oh, are you the nanny? Oh, this mom must be so overjoyed how beautiful her twins are. And I'd say, no, these are my twins. They're yours? No. I'm like, yes, genetics are wild, But there was countless times where folks would think that I wasn't their mother. No joke. I was in a public library. We went because we're trying to get out of the house, trying to manage. We would go to the library for the weekend, for a couple of hours. I'm nursing one of my twins. I'm nursing one of the twins. Lady comes up. Oh, you're such a nice nanny. I'm like, nanny? This baby. We don't do wet nursing anymore. Is that the 1850s? Like most bonker thing ever. But that was the biggest, yeah.
Yeah. Were you offended by those comments? Like, I mean, I can imagine being
100%.
really offended. Yeah. Like,
percent. Because we're in public,
yeah,
full of anger, but I'm also trying to model for my oldest and for myself that you don't have to respond with hate.
yes,
they're coming from a place of bigotry, of confusion, and sometimes they're trying to get under your skin. They're trying. And I would just look at them like, are you kidding me? Like, I'm surprised you felt comfortable to say that out loud.
Yes.
And it wasn't like it was a private conversation. It was a loud statement. The library statement was loud. Like, we were in the children's section. There's other parents. And I live in a very multicultural, diverse area with like half the libraries in like Vietnamese or Spanish. Like, this isn't just like a very, one frame of families, very diverse. And I look the look on the face, like, are you kidding me? What?
Yeah.
It's crazy. And of course that comes to with being married to someone who is not the same race as me. I've had folks many times say, oh, are y'all together? I'm like, of course. I just was kissing him, like, yes, he's paying my bill. So I kind of was used to it. Of course, my parents being mixed race, my mom being white, my dad being Black, used to this confusion of like, racial ambiguity, ambidextrous. I'm sorry. You know what I mean? Where it's like, you can't tell who they are,
Yeah.
So they try to use these snide questions. And of course, being in the South, the US, people are going to say stuff. They're gonna
Yeah.
get their little twang, and they're gonna say, "Excuse me, are you
Uh-huh.
the mother of these babies?" I'm like, yes, yes, I am. I prefer that question than the like saying I'm a nanny or that I'm like the babysitter or like the best friend.
Yeah.
So but it happens. So that's the biggest thing. And now the twins are older, they can say, "That's my mom," or
Yes.
of course that she's my mother. They let people have it. And I can't
Yeah.
hold them back. I can't hold them back because they are rambunctious and loud like I am. Especially
Yeah.
my daughter. She will tell someone.
Well,
Yeah.
I can see from those experiences, because I know you've described yourself as an advocate for people identifying as fat as well as Black,
Yes.
Indigenous, or as people of color. And I can see even from those experiences why someone would need to advocate for people who might what we might call not mainstream, if you like, or not the majority.
Yeah.
So can you share with us why this is such important work? What are the unique struggles or challenges that you face, that individuals that fall into any of these categories face? What are some of their struggles?
I think the biggest thing, especially with birth and even more so with multiples, is this assumption that the person is ignorant or uneducated, or they may not have the ability to get the educational information. And that is so frustrating when it comes to birth. And so that's a huge reason why I became a doula, is because I've watched Black moms be treated like children when they're laboring and be like, "Excuse me, did you look at me? Can you give me eye contact?" Like, why does someone in labor have to give you eye contact? And I've worked with them and seen doctors and nurses treat these women, these humans, as if they're worthless. And so it's a huge reason why like the two lenses come together, the reproductive justice and cultural competency, is letting folks know like you have the right to be treated as an adult, as a human being. You have the right to stand up when you feel ignored. And there's a sheer number of deaths of Black women specifically who've gone into hospitals expecting to come home and not coming home. They're not making it home because their pain was ignored, their bleeding was ignored, their prior health history was ignored. There's countless stories of women who have gone into that space and been completely ignored. There's a really good documentary called Aftershock that documents the birth of two babies whose mothers passed away. And even more recently, I have a doula friend in Brooklyn who works with a hospital system. They just had a death this last week of another young woman who went into the hospital and should have come home. And so this is happening so many times where, there's one of the births they talk about in the documentary, a woman who had a cesarean and she had a bladder nick and continued to bleed out. And her husband's pleading for her help. He's an accomplished person. She's like a lawyer. These are well-educated adults with, affluent jobs who are losing their lives. They say the statistic runs that a white female who is a high school dropout is safer to come home from birth than a educated, employed Black woman. So there's the chance of death is higher with more education than with
Yeah.
less, which is
Yeah. Wow.
devastating. And so, people try to spin it and say, "Oh, well, it's actually not this, it's genetics." It is not genetics. It's human error and it is bias. It is racial bias. I am one to
Yes.
call it what it is and not sweep it under the rug, call a spade a spade. And so
Yes.
a lot of what I do is giving parents the words and the support. And so a lot of my clients, especially in the last 2 years, have been mothers who are not from the United States. Or if they're from the United States, they have a background there, that BIPOC, that Black, Indigenous, person of color. And so that's the primarily that group. And then of course, I love working with fat moms because there's a whole layer of misogyny and stuff with when you're not, a straight size person. Being a plus size person as myself, being a size 26 in American sizing, over 300 pounds, that automatically they look at me like, "Oh my God, she doesn't eat right. She's obviously lazy." Laziness is a comment towards being Black, and she's ignorant. And then add to the fact that like maybe I'm not dressing appropriately, maybe I'm talking a little fast. they'll say, oh, you're a drug seeker. I'm like, no, I'm not a drug seeker. I'm here with my client. I'm not, so there's lots of things where I come in to field that and or shield my clients from it, to say like, we're not going to talk about that. No, thank you. Or I'll dismiss it. Or someone comes into the room, starts calling them, young girl, little girl, or, pet names. That's a very Southern thing to do, to try to almost take someone's age from them and make them as a child when they're not. They're a full grown adult with a mortgage and 2 bachelor degrees, like,
Yes.
treat them with respect, please. Or they're
Yeah.
actually doctors, they're being dismissed. And so it's so important to give people their power back, know that they're up against a system that was not designed to protect them is huge. And there's been an amazing amount of new folks coming in, becoming midwives or becoming, labor and delivery nurses with a desire to protect more people. And one of the organizations I just started working with is the National Perinatal Task Force, where they're working to provide safe spots. So there's this viewpoint called a maternal toxic zone, where an area where there's been a certain number of deaths, or hospitals are not providing care to BIPOC individuals, and they're providing support to help those folks in those areas get care from people like myself, other providers that are culturally competent, safe, and are going to protect them and not turn them away. Because there's a lot of issues of, we're just full up on clients, or we can't take you on as a patient. Or they immediately said that someone is using, federal aid for insurance. Oh, I'm sorry, we don't take you anymore. When I'm like, you took them 2 weeks ago, but you saw the demographics and you said, well, I don't think I want my numbers to slip, so I'm not going to take you. So making sure people have advocacy and support to get care, to get quality care, and to make sure that they get their voices heard. So I could talk on this topic probably for a couple of hours, but it's just important to know, if you're curious about this, look at the hospital statistics, look at the provider statistics. If it's not public, there's no hurt to call and ask. There's no hurt to, hey, how many clients they take on that are Indigenous? Does this person speak Spanish? Does this person speak this language? How do they interact? Ask the nursing staff. Nurses will tell you, oh yeah, you don't want this doctor. Or no, they're actually this, or they're actually that. So it can be helpful to have those tools. And I think that's a huge reason why I'm in this space, is to give people the tools, like I mentioned before, give them their power, and then hold their space for them so they can feel protected when they go to have their babies.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely amazing and so needed. I think that, I heard one of the statistics and this is obviously coming out of the United States, because I know the situation here
Yes.
in Australia might be different, but certainly here in Australia, we have disparities for Indigenous
Yes.
populations. But in the States, I was reading that it was 2 or 3 times higher for Black and Indigenous mothers, as opposed, compared to white mothers, for them to have pregnancy-related mortality rates.
Yes.
Their rates are 2 to 3 times higher. So I know you touched on this a bit already, but what do you think needs to shift in order to address these maternal and infant health disparities?
I think the biggest thing that could shift is education and implicit bias for everyone that's in the medical system, everyone, because it goes down from the person answering the phones all the way through to the surgical tech in the OR. Everyone needs to be re-educated on all this information. It wasn't even that long ago that medical textbooks were still teaching that Black people did not feel as much pain as a white person, and that there are certain cultural things, like offer them mashed potatoes if they seem hungry. Like what? Like what even is that? So there's
Yeah.
lots of this entwined racial disparity, this entwined hatred that is not science-based. It's not even close to protecting and caring for people. There was a number of people that moved to the States from other countries during the pandemic. They got pregnant and they left. They went back to Nigeria. They went back to the UK. They moved to other countries to have their babies. I legit watched this person the day who was from the States. They were living in Ireland. They went to Dubai to have their baby. They felt safer literally immigrating to Dubai for 6 months to have their baby, because the medical care was better, because they could get supportive care and be like cared for and watched after. In the States, it's so much of a, pull a ticket, wait your number, get called, 5 minutes with the doctor, and you leave. It's not supportive of, hey, I keep having this pain in my side, and when I pee, I see a little bit of blood. Can you help me? You're normal, you're fine. You don't have a fever, you're fine. Instead of like, no, actually there's something wrong with that person's bladder or their kidneys. Like, let's investigate. There's less investigation. There's less questions being asked. It's such a short thing. So the education needs to be done. The patient care model needs to be reevaluated. And it is imperative we do so because we're going to keep losing mothers. We're going to keep having these children coming home with no moms. And the frustrating thing is there's been cases of dads trying to advocate for their wife in labor or, after the cesarean, and having security called on them, having the police called on them when they're just asking for fluids or pain medication because the nurses believe that they don't need it. Oh, you had some 7 hours ago. You're fine. Postpartum's supposed to hurt. Contractions, you don't need an epidural. You're fine. The blood in your catheter is normal. It's okay if you're dizzy a little bit. No, it's not. They would never tell a white mom, you're okay. They would say, oh, sure, let me go ahead and get the information. The voices are not, there's no power in them. The staff does not care. And this is happening all across the United States in all population zones. This isn't just located to Brooklyn or Dallas, Houston, LA. This is happening all across the United States. Not to mention the sheer number of maternal labor wards that have been closed recently. I know in Alabama alone, they lost 3 in the last month, where some families are driving 2.5 hours on a highway just to get to L&D to have their babies. And so imagine that. You already were driving 30, 40 minutes because you lived in rural America. Now you're driving 2.5 hours to see a doctor.
Yeah,
and
wow.
this is continuing to happen. And so it's a lot of medicalization, but also the profit. They don't care. They don't care. And that's unfortunate. And that's the truth. And I know for some, this is a very heavy topic. It is challenging, but it is the reality we're facing right now. And so even with my birth, with my twins and my oldest, I went in with a medical directive. I went in with a legal document saying, you're going to provide me this care. I have advocates listed. I have a medical, provider listed that knows of my health information and what you're going to do and not going to do. And for instance, even to protect my bleeding, I had a cell saver in the room that, that's a whole medical thing where they actually suck up any blood that's lost, clean it and put it back into the body just to prevent there being any kind of risk brought in for my twin delivery. So things like that I'm taking precaution because I know that there's a possibility of there being excess blood loss or other things, excess clotting. Did we have to use it? No, the team just stood there the whole time. But I was thankful that they were there to one more thing. So having that information is key. Like I said before, asking hospital systems, calling the doctor's offices, seeing who's safe, getting on the Facebook groups and on Discord and on TikTok, Googling your doctor, reading the health reviews is important. No matter what healthcare system you're in, who did I just see? What's their name? Let me look them up real quick. Because even if you can't choose, you can still determine what the care, if it was adequate or not. But it's a challenge. It is a huge challenge. And then that's just the layers of, multiples in birth and race. You add anything else, any other buckets like housing issues or employment or, previous health issues, then the list just gets, more of the stress that people have to deal with. But it is my thing to add all of this in to protect people because everyone deserves to come home. Everyone deserves to come home and have that family unit be protected. No matter what they look like, no matter how they identify, they deserve at the basic human right to hold their baby and come home.
Yeah. That, I love that basic human right. And I think it does start with, you mentioned education.
Yes.
And you're right there. I think absolutely education at all levels, the professionals, sure, the people working in the hospital, sure, but then even just the general public, raising awareness. And, that's why I started this podcast is also as a way to support parents of multiples, to raise awareness about different issues that affect the multiple birth community. And I think it's really incumbent upon all of us really to do that, as working in any kind of capacity with parents and families, that we address some of the stuff, that we are culturally competent, that we challenge our own biases and assumptions, and that we actively strive towards bettering the systems, which it sounds like from the work that you're doing, you're really focused on that, which is absolutely amazing.
It's one of my favorite things to do, is to give someone support, give them their power back, and let them know that they're heard, that they're nurtured and supported, and that I'm with them through the whole journey, even the weird diaper photos, at 6 weeks, they're like, what's going on? So
Yeah.
I think that's the most beautiful thing about being a doula, is knowing that you're with that family for life. And I've had the beauty of working with multiple families in my journey where they've had baby number 2 or 3. And it's just a beautiful thing. It literally is my dream job. And I hope that I can inspire more folks to do this, because it's very heart-centered and it's very nurture giving, where you are helping someone in the precious, most tenderest moments of their life, with their babies and with their family being started or growing, depending on what's going on. And I love it. I love it so much.
I wonder if we could end the conversation with one piece of advice that you would give other parents navigating the multiple birth journey. What would you tell them?
Flexibility. Flexibility is key. It's my favorite thing to talk about, and because you never know what's going to happen. So all the way from when you get the positive pregnancy test, all the way till they're going off to college, being flexible is imperative. And that can mean for our own expectations. It can mean for our relationships expectations and for our children. So knowing that sometimes we're not going to make it on time to the event, that's okay. Knowing that sometimes we're going to be an hour early, being flexible. Maybe we're not going to keep the matching outfits. Like, I knew for myself that it'd be hard to keep matching outfits, so I just did matching names. Everybody's got an E name, so we match a name, but it works. So just knowing what I need to do is the flexibility. And then of course that supports everything else, like boundaries and relationship. If you're flexible, you can make it work. And knowing that it's okay, sometimes we got to pick and choose, and flexibility gives us that ability to do so.
That's a wonderful piece of advice. Thank you so much, Michelle. It's been such a pleasure connecting with you today, and wishing you all the best with your work. You're doing such amazing work. Thank you for all the work that you do.
You're welcome. It's been the best talking with you as well.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you like what you've heard, then please follow and leave a review so that other expectant and current parents of multiples like yourself can find this podcast and the valuable information it contains. I'd be so very grateful if you left a review and shared this with anyone you think could benefit from listening. If you have a particular topic you'd like me to cover on this podcast, feel free to reach out to me via my website, fiercekindmama.com. New episodes are released every second Wednesday, so I'll see you back here real soon. Any advice and information in this podcast is general only and has been prepared without taking into account your particular circumstances and needs. For tailored, individualized advice, please consult with a qualified professional.